US President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed a new era in India-US ties after White House rolled out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister signing deals aimed at countering China's influence. The two countries announced agreements on semiconductors, critical minerals, technology, space cooperation and defense cooperation. Amid China's territorial ambitions, Washington is working to deepen ties with the world's largest democracy and sees deeper military-to-military and technology ties in future. The United States is India's largest trading partner, and some of the new agreements are aimed at diversifying supply chains to reduce dependence on Beijing. Others are aimed at cornering the market in advanced technologies that may feature on the battlefields of the future. The US President and the Indian Prime Minister also ended disputes at the World Trade Organization, and India removed some tariffs on US goods. Biden and the Prime Minister signed off on a deal that would allow US-based General Electric to produce engines for military aircrafts on Indian soil. While India can manufacture jets domestically, it has now secured the technical know-how to make aircraft engines. The country intends to produce more than 350 fighter jets for its Air Force and Navy over the next 2 decades. Under a maritime agreement, US Navy ships in the region will be able to stop in Indian shipyards for repairs. As per the joint statement, Biden and the Prime Minister welcomed India's plans to procure General Atomics MQ-9B drones. The drones, which will be assembled in India, will enhance the intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities of the nation's armed forces across domains. General Atomics will establish a global maintenance, repair and overhaul facility in India to support New Delhi's long-term goals to boost indigenous defense capabilities. US chipmaker Micron Technology plans a $2.7 billion semiconductor testing and packaging unit to be built in the Indian state of Gujarat. Boeing has announced a $100 million investment in infrastructure and programs to train pilots in India. The US will also make it easier for skilled Indian workers to get and renew US visas. India also agreed to join the US-led Artemis Accords on space exploration. New Delhi also agreed to work with NASA on a joint mission to the International Space Station in 2024. In his second address to the joint sitting of the US Congress, the Indian Prime Minister underlined a free and open Indo-Pacific as being crucial.
The dark clouds of coercion and confrontation are casting their shadow in the Indo-Pacific. The stability of the region has become one of the central concerns of our partnership. We share a vision of a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific.
The India and US bond is underpinned by not just global politics but also business and economics. Trade between the United States and India in 2022 climbed to a record $191 billion. The two nations earlier launched a collaborative technology initiative with eyes on future development. Washington and New Delhi have been moving closer for over 2 decades now. Successive US presidents have displayed bipartisan support for stronger ties with the emerging Asian economy and regional powers. President Joe Biden has built on that legacy and expanded cooperation. Well, like I mentioned, it is the last leg of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States. He's expected to have a one-to-one meeting with CEOs at the Kennedy Center. He will address the Indian diaspora at the Ronald Reagan Center, which includes doctors, hoteliers, lawyers and businessmen. This is in an effort to enhance business and trade. Let's talk more about this visit, and joining us now is our correspondent, Siddhant Sibol, who is at the White House, and also Susan Teherani, our correspondent in New York. Susan and Siddhant Sibol, good to see you. Siddhant Sibol, I'll begin with you. Just a few moments ago, the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications in the United States, John Kirby, did make a statement about the Indian Prime Minister's visit. He also met the Indian Prime Minister yesterday, where he said India is a world player as well as the net exporter of security and stability. Maybe you can tell us more about that meeting, Siddhant.
Well, there have been several meetings in the last 48 hours, each meeting being a very significant meeting. The last, of course, is the lunch which is underway, the lunch where the VP Kamala Harris and the US Secretary of State Blinken are present. They made several statements lauding, of course, India and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Essentially, before that, the focus remained the technological partnership event, which is basically technological handshake. It was a significant event in terms of the gathering of who's who of America and India, CEOs of top countries present, and there was an emphasis that both countries need to collaborate on technological cooperation. We know that initiative was launched earlier this year on critical technologies and also on emerging technologies, and focus remains that how this remains an important part of partnership. Now, focus shifts very soon to the Prime Minister's meeting with entrepreneurs and also the members of the Indian diaspora. But all in all, the last day will see Prime Minister's engagement that basically focuses on how India sees India sees the Indian diaspora as the main substratum of this relationship. There are 4 million members of the Indian diaspora here in the United States, and many of them are in the policy making, including in the Biden administration, like Richard Verma, that showcases the role. While they are just 1% of the population here in America, but they have a significant impact, a larger impact on the American society. So all in all, Prime Minister's meeting is to send a message as to how India and the United States cement their relationship at a time of great global changes and the rise of a very aggressive China, and how India and the United States have multiple convergences and multiple pillars of relationship.
Siddhant Sibal, stay with me. He is live in Washington, D.C. at the White House. Let's go now to our correspondent in New York, Susan Teherani. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, did meet with CEOs in America and also the Indian Prime Minister. And according to the President, he says the talks of a united India and America when it comes to trade is booming, and he also said that trade has more than doubled over the past decade. Probably you can tell us more about America's vision when it comes to trade and business with India.
Yeah, the United States is India's biggest trading partner currently, and trade relations between the two sides have only expanded in recent years. Even from 2022, it's a lot higher than it was, as you mentioned, since a decade ago. Well, things are very different for the United States and for India as well. If there was one lesson that COVID taught the two countries, it was the issue of not relying on a single source of supply chain. So to diversify the supply chain in a post-COVID world is very important for the two sides, notably for the United States, which saw how much it was dependent on China in a lot of ways, and a partner in the Indo-Pacific, not only for trade, but the economy is good, but also for President Biden here back home, where the economy isn't doing so great. And while the numbers are high, they're not exceeding expectations at all. And that's why we heard President Biden talk about how Boeing infrastructure and the deal with Boeing for India will create about 1 million jobs here in the United States, but also for India as well. To tap into Indian talent, not only here but abroad, is also to the benefit of both countries. And we heard from both sides that they had overcome some trade barriers. They signed about 6 trade deals together. Well, that may be symbolic at this point, but it is a first step, because one of the issues that India and the United States didn't see eye to eye was on the issue of trade. So I think they're moving closer to each other. There were some tariffs lifted on the part of India regarding U.S. goods. So it's a great first step. I think both sides are very optimistic. And again, diversifying the supply chain is so important, not only for India and the United States, but for the international community as well, that do business with these two countries and want to decouple, in a sense, from China.
Siddhant, Talking about optimism and the future, the White House has also announced plans to cooperate on quantum computing, scientific research and technological innovation alongside plans to manufacture weapons in India. How can this benefit India in the long run?
Well, one of the key focus areas of India-US cooperation has been co-production in defense. We saw several announcements being made, whether it's Predator drone deal, whether it is the HAL and GE jet manufacturing announcement. And India, of course, is keen on Make in India. It needs technology, and America can be a good partner for it at a time when we know that India is trying to become a country that exports defense equipment rather than imports. It is already a major importer of defense equipment, and it is looking for markets, especially in Africa. In fact, all through the visit, whether it's a US visit or the Egypt visit of Prime Minister travels to Egypt after that, focus remains on defense. The Egyptians are keen to buy India's LCA Tejas, and India is keen to enter the African market through Egypt. So America does play an important role in fulfilling India's a gamut of needs in terms of technology, in terms of security as well. Both countries are working together in terms of counter-terror. The fact that Pakistan was mentioned by name in the joint statement released by India and the United States shows that, of course, India and US will be collaborating on that front, especially putting out more names for listing at the United Nations Security Council.
Susan, this is the final leg of the Indian Prime Minister's visit to the United States. Probably, what are the major takeaways of his visit to the United States?
Yeah, there are so many takeaways, really. I mean, we saw collaboration and cooperation really on every field, and I think that's why U.S. President Joe Biden called this relationship being dynamic, and this visit, being very dynamic in terms of really tapping into all avenues. We saw the issue of defense, obviously, that really made headlines prior to the Prime Minister's visit, but then trade, as we just talked about, was very important as well. Semiconductors, the issue of artificial intelligence is also very noteworthy, considering the fact that India has great talent in understanding artificial intelligence, and the United States is weary of the disruption that AI may cause, notably here in the United States regarding misinformation and disinformation. And again, we have an election coming up. This is something that Americans are very concerned on both sides of the aisle. So about AI, that was very important that they had those discussions, and we'll learn more about how they want to move forward in that regard. And then obviously, it was the people to people that we've been talking about. These interactions really cannot be underestimated, considering the fact that not only Indians back home are watching, but Indian Americans here are also watching this visit very closely. And we really see that kind of engagement from Prime Minister Modi with the Indian American diaspora.
Live from New York, our correspondent Susan Teherani, and live from Washington, D.C., White House, our diplomatic correspondent Sidhant Sibol. Sidhant and Susan, thank you very much for talking to us at this hour.